My New Year started with a bang. Literally. I didn't feel like I was driving fast, but perception can be a bit disoriented after a few units of alcohol. I've always been someone who fervently refused to drive under the influence. However, it was late in the New Year's Eve, and the roads were especially empty, and I had no other place to stay. I didn't fancy Uber or a taxi, because I had made the stupid decision to drive there and didn't want a taxi back to pick up my car. I'd almost made it back. I was careful throughout most of my journey, but when I hit the country roads, I got complacent. A patch of wet mud slipped a wheel, and soon my car was tumbling over and over around a field. After that, I remember things in flashes. Lights flickering across my face, people in high-vis clothing shouting, urgent screaming to others who moved fast at his words, more lights and a blaring siren. When my mind started to soothe into a constant stream of time, I was being pushed through the many double doors of a hospital, the sterile smell of the building filling my senses, mixed in with a copper smell of my own blood. Before I even stopped, I knew this was going to be rough. All the while, a persistent thought ran through my head. Those annoying rumors that I was told when young, that if you're an organ donor and you show up as a wreck, they're more likely to harvest your insides than treat you. I always ignored them and signed up, knowing it was the right thing to do. But a small seed of annoying doubt flickered in my mind in my stressed state. In my head, I felt fine. The adrenaline of the situation casting a wave of denial over me. In my head, I felt like I was still a functional person. I tried to prove it by getting up, but my body didn't listen, no matter how hard my mind screamed. I settled down after testing my limits, knowing I had little vision through my half-open eyes and hearing through one ear, and for now, this was all I had. A niggling fear that this would be the life I would be resigned to for the rest of my life. When still, everything still felt in motion. My senses battered, vertigo swimming in my head as I saw doctors and nurses rushing. I was comforted at this, until they all stopped in unison. A niggling fear setting in as to why they stopped during such an important time for treatment. A new figure had joined the fray. A man in a formal black suit. Despite the whines of the machines linked up to my body, no one made any progress with treatment while he was around. He spoke in an authoritative tone, though I could not hear the exact words he was saying. What I did hear was the doctor protesting to whatever he was demanding, uttering the phrase, "No, we can treat him." A hopeful phrase to me, which fell on deaf ears. Suddenly, the fear of secret organ harvesters for rich clients swam back up my spine. The room fell silent, quiet enough for me to just about hear the words spoken by the mysterious figure told in a humming tone. He stated that, on paper, I was a goner, but then mentioned something about a study I signed up for, before silence fell once more. After a brief period of pondering, the doctor ushered the nurses and other attendees away, and they were quickly replaced with more official-looking figures in suits. I tried screaming for help, feeling that everything about the situation was wrong, but all that came out were barely audible wheezes, which dissipated into the air, no one taking notice, -1. The doctor, a look of defeat as he turned away in shame and fear. I panicked inside. In this heightened state, I remembered what he was possibly referring to. While studying in university, there was a small campaign to make an extra bit of cash, to sign up for an experiment by, quote, selling my body to science. The way they worded it was that it would only really happen in death. It seemed like free money at the time, and most people were selling their plasma at this point for food money, so the idea of signing away my body past death never seemed like a bad idea at the time. I wouldn't be doing anything with it anyway. Though at the time, I imagined death would be much later in life, and more importantly, I'd be, actually dead. Instead, I was now being carted in a helpless state to the roof of the hospital building, mistaken for a brain-dead patient, where a blackout helicopter was waiting. I was rushed in where a few medical attendees kept me stable throughout the rough air ride. Any comfort I had through this rough ride was drained from me when I no longer saw the lights of civilization through the window slat I could peek through. Wherever I was flown to, it was completely out of town. I was still conscious through the flight, though I no longer wanted to be. My waking life now, a nightmare that I wanted to drift away from in the unconscious. In a haggard state, I was pulled from the helicopter and dragged through more long corridors. The calming, clean hospital appearance from before, replaced by these suited men in a sterile gunmetal-styled building. I recognized the room I was dragged into as barely an operating room. What I just about recognized was overwhelmed by what felt more like a military base. The attending doctor spoke to me, which shocked me. I figured they accidentally thought I was brain dead up to this point, and they optimistically felt I was okay to experiment with. The fact that he acknowledged my consciousness sickened me. No longer did I feel this was a terrible misunderstanding, now knowing it was directly them taking advantage of my helpless state. I was put under and finally able to escape the conscious hell I was brought into. I had no concept of time to determine how long I was put under, though there were more pressing matters that came to mind when I awoke. Slowly, I looked around my surroundings. I was in a comfortable living room, untouched, yet furnished and ready to be used. What didn't feel welcoming was the fact that it wasn't my home. I slinked up, slowly, my form hesitant to move. Apprehensive, I grabbed at myself, checking to physically feel if anything had changed. And to my shock, something had. My stomach and torso area were wrapped tightly with bandages. It was almost like a second skin, it was that tight and seamless. However, that didn't explain why I felt so emaciated. I rubbed around in disbelief, hoping it was a trick of the mind. But when my arm easily reached around my waist to my spine, I confirmed there was something horribly wrong with my form. When I pressed around, what remained felt dense, yet soft, similar to a stiff memory foam mattress. I stumbled to the kitchen area, struggling to compensate with my now drastically lower body weight, and tried to drink to parch my dry mouth, a stress relief in my past life. However, as soon as I tried to swallow the liquid, it shot back up my throat and out my mouth. My body rejected the drink. I tried once more to the same effect. Panicked, I looked around for answers, which came in the form of a note neatly folded on the dining room table. With nimble fingers, I pried open the paper, which released some more contents. I chose to read first. The note spoke of the deal I'd made in university and gladly told me that their experiment was a success. The experiment they performed was a full internal organ extraction. I was gleefully informed that I no longer had to eat, drink, or sleep. The only stipulation was that I was to remain with them for further testing, and reminded me that this was what I signed up for. My breathing picked up. I scooped up the papers that fell, which was a currency not familiar to me. These notes were very bland compared to anything I was used to. They almost looked counterfeit, but even counterfeit money attempted to look real. Each one displayed an unknown symbol to me, followed by a number. I stumbled outside and looked around. There were people wandering the street. Some were like me, and others with bizarre additions. New arms where an arm shouldn't be. Strange combinations of what looked to be siblings, connected at intervals along their bodies. There were kids playing in a yard, each a disturbing concoction of parts. I looked further down the street and saw a building which stood out between the stereotypical suburban housing that lined the road. It was a small complex that looked like a shop. A familiar symbol branded on the side, the same one on the notes. From there, I turned my head further, seeing the tall, foreboding wire fencing surrounding the happy suburban homes. The ugly truth encapsulating the beautiful lie these people lived in, where I now lived in. Security personnel lined many points. Any form of escape would be a pipe dream at most. I looked back at the people, living their lives on this one strip of houses. I studied them, looking beyond their bizarre features and twisted appearances. There was not a single smile. Each person carried a look of defeat on their faces. Their actions carried an air of acceptance.